Greetings, listeners, and welcome to our special 4-part series all about one of nature's most beautiful spectacles, the Aurora. Brought to you by Sky at Night magazine and Hurtigruten. Episode 4, Photographing the Aurora.
Hello, today I'm talking to Jamen Percy, a renowned photographer and someone who knows all about the magic of the Aurora. Jamen was the winner of the Astronomy Photographer of the Year Aurora category in 2015 for his image Silk Skies, and is here today to tell us about how to capture the incredible colours of one of nature's greatest spectacles. Jamen, thanks for coming on the podcast and for speaking to me today.
Good day, Ian. How you doing?
Not too bad. Yeah, I thought we'd kick off with that image, Silk Skies, won you the Aurora category in 2015. Tell us about what it was like capturing that image and entering into the competition.
Sure, yeah. So I've been chasing the Aurora for about 3 or 4 years by then. I've become a seasoned professional and just absolutely loved it. Every season I go back. And I found this really cool place in Sweden called Abisko National Park. And there's like a little ski lodge there. And during the peak winter, it's like minus 35 there. So no locals go there. It's just too cold to ski. But they've got all this cheap accommodation because they've got a whole huge village there that's just empty. So, it's a really cheap accommodation sort of area. So we'd go there and they had saunas and stuff as well. So you could chill out in the sauna, then go have a look, see if the Aurora was doing anything and stuff like that. So great little hotspot. So definitely look it up. I'm sure it's still there. It's a huge ski lodge. And so I used to climb the mountain every night and look for the Aurora and wait for it to come. And they have this beautiful sort of really soft, I think they call them fells, where it's like it used to be a mountain, but over time it's become just a giant sort of round mound, really soft and really chilled out landscape. And the snow was so thick and so deep. It was this beautiful sort of silky sort of environment already. Like without the Aurora, it was just beautiful, like this frozen landscape. And so I absolutely loved the area and would always go back there and take friends there. And this one night I was out there to about 2 a.m. and my friends had gone back. They're sort of given up because it got so cold, but I'd always sort of be the last one surviving with freezing cold shoes. But I didn't matter because it was only a 10-minute walk back down to the lodge. So I was like, I can be so uncomfortable right now. It doesn't matter. There's a sauna waiting for me when I get back. So that was pretty cool. I was like chilled, freezing to death, but totally cool. And I'd waited for so long and I was like, oh, you know what? It's probably not going to come tonight. Oh, well, like you do a lot of nights. And so I was like, I'll pack it up and come back down and chill out with my friends. So I got my tripod on my shoulder, turned around and started to walk down the mountain. I was trudging down and then suddenly I just saw my own shadow light up in this green light. I looked, oh my God, turned around and there it was, just across the skies. And I didn't have any time to do anything. I didn't have time to find like a tree or any foreground. I had no chance. I said, it's either now or never. So I threw the tripod down, put it in, turned the camera back on and hit go, like snap. And that was that shot. You can even see my footprints in the foreground of me trudging down the mountain. And there's nothing else in the shot. And that was actually the best part of the shot. It was so minimal in the visuals that it becomes like almost an abstract painting. Like you look at it and go, what is that? And then you start to sort of see these little clues of like a little bit of texture of snow. Go, oh, that's a mountain. And of course, it's not a big mountain with Alps in the background or anything. It's like this white sort of mass taking up half of the screen. And then this beautiful green silky skies in front of you. And it just became this iconic image. And I knew when I looked at the back of the camera, I was like, whoa, I was just like, that's out of this world. I was just sort of like, oh my God. Yeah. So that was the story of that image. And I came back to London where I was living at the time. And then someone told me about the exhibition they have. I was like, oh, okay, I might as well enter it. And then, did incredibly well. And a lot of people have ordered prints from it and asked about it. And it's been quite a famous little piece. The hardest bit of that story was the BBC, you guys arranged an interview with a local Swedish radio just after the win. And I said to them on one condition, I was like, don't ask me to describe the picture because it's so hard to describe it on radio. And then you guys also have a translator to translate it into Sweden. And they said, okay, no problem. We'll make sure they know that. And the first thing in, this Swedish radio host goes, so Jamen, you're live on air. Tell us, what's this image? Like, describe it to us. And I'm like, no. But I managed to still pull it off. And I'm not sort of the seat of my pants sort of just gave a rough description because it's so hard to describe because it's just so minimal. Really a challenge. That's the hardest bit of it is to describe it. So I encourage anyone to, if you do search for my name or BBC Aurora Jamen Percy, you'll probably see it. And that'll help describe what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think there's something sort of innately about images of the Aurora that makes them hard to describe in general.
So unworldly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, from an artistic perspective, is that what draws you to the Aurora as a photographer? Because I've seen like your work, you cover sort of wildlife and humans and festivals and things. What is it that draws you to the Aurora?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things that absolutely draw me in. First of all, though, it was my very first solo adventure, and it was the first time taking a camera on a holiday. So before then, there's like the tonal point and shoot stuff, but this is my first real major camera. And I had this spare holidays to burn, and I always just wondered, is this Aurora thing really real? I was like, I've seen documentaries from the BBC. I think with David Attenborough was the first time I saw it. I was like, wow, that's incredible. And then I was just always wondering, is that really that real? Is it like that? And I had these questions just nagging me. And one day I was like, you know what? I've got to burn 5 days of holiday. I'm just going to jump up to Norway and see if it's real. So off I did, and then of course the rest is history. But because it's that first moment of going solo traveling and being out there and adventuring and trying new things was just this incredible moment of me, like coming of age, if you like. I was about 25 at the time. And then I realized that all these things I've seen on TV, I can now go and do. I was like, oh my God, all those wildlife documentaries of photographing all sorts of crazy stuff. I can just do that now. Like I'm at the age where I can afford it. I've got the maturity. I can go and safely do these things. So it's this huge opening for me where my whole world became so much bigger all of a sudden. And the Aurora was this hook that brought me there. So I sort of owe it to the Aurora for this amazing magical part of my life. But the Aurora itself is different every time you look at it. It will never be the same. The color, the shape, the speed, the patterns, and of course the foreground of where you are, like everything's about it is completely different every time. And that becomes like a challenge to how to photograph it and to be on your feet and think, because 1 minute could be there looking beautiful, but then there's another amazing bit over there. You're like, I've got to make a choice. Which one do I photograph? Unless you got two cameras, which I did eventually in one end. So you got it's just this always ever evolving, ever in awe sort of thing. It's so hard to describe, and there's nothing else really like it. It just looks so incredible. And the scale of it as well is what really trips me out, because you realize that that's at the very tip of the atmosphere between the stars and between the Earth's air. And that makes it just huge. And it will be from one horizon to the other. So it is like, sun proportion size, it feels like. It makes you feel like a tiny little ant, and you're just on this little marble in the huge galaxy. Just incredible feeling. And so, yeah, every time I'm just in awe. It doesn't matter how many times I've seen it. 10 years down the track, I'm still in awe when I see it and get this incredible butterflies in my stomach.
There must always also be the element of the difference between how it appears to your human eye in comparison to what you can actually capture with the camera. Is it much different?
Yes and no, I'd say. I'd say yes and no. If it's a really low level aurora, where it's just like a tinted sort of cloud on the horizon, if you do like a 30-second exposure, you'll actually really elevate those colors, and it will be like a beautiful green band in your photograph. But to the eye, it's like a really sort of desaturated, sort of just a slightly green cloud where you're not really sure what it is. But then you get these, what they call solar storm, where it's so powerful, so strong. It's just, you can't even capture it in one picture. It's just happening so fast, so quickly, so brightly, it'll literally cast a shadow on the ground. And those ones where, like, people would pull over and be like, oh my God, even the locals were like, oh, look at that. So you get those moments as well. So you can also, of course, you can make everything in between, you can make it look stronger than it is with a camera. And a lot of people do. But you're allowed to do that. If it's a long exposure, you're allowed to do that, as long as you sort of claim how long you're exposed for, of course. And then there's other ways of doing it. You can do a long exposure on a really strong aurora, but then put down your ISO really low. So you actually will capture this incredible 30 seconds of humongous blast over 30 seconds in one picture. Or you can do like 5-second bursts where you'll get this brightness of 5 seconds. So it depends how you capture it. You can, I wouldn't say cheat it, but you can enhance it with your settings. But that is a natural part of photography, doing long exposure. Same with if you're photographing the Milky Way. Most of those shots are really long exposures, like 1 to 2 minutes maybe, to get the detail of the Milky Way. So it's no different from that, really. But I mean, what you want to aim for is those huge solar storms where you really need to do 5-second exposures, if not less. And it's ever changing and just huge all over the sky. So that's what you sort of deep down you aim for.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to ask you actually, is as we're sort of approaching solar maximum, which is the sort of maximum activity of the solar cycle, more activity on the sun producing more aurora as seen from Earth. Are you taking advantage of that now? Have you been capturing these amazing aurora displays that we've been seeing this year?
Currently, I haven't been able to because of work, because I'm so far away. I'm back down in Sydney now. But a couple of years ago, I did do a few trips down Tasmania, which is the Southern Lights. I went about 3 or 4 times, loved it. It's much harder because it's much further away in the horizon, because of the physical distance of Tasmania to the Arctic Circle. Whereas Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, you're actually right above you, the hot spot, if you like, because it becomes like a ring around the north and a ring around the south, sort of the globe. So if you're on that ring, you're going to guaranteed to be above your head. And that ring sort of gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But by the time, unfortunately, Tasmania is a bit too far away. So you see it very far on the horizon. And of course, that gives rise to the fact that there can be so much cloud cover in the way of you in the Aurora. So your chances of seeing it are much slimmer. But I did make a few great trips down there. And I am planning on end of this year and next year, or both, to go back up to the Northern Hemisphere and do like a big long circuit. I've got all my friends, of course, that I used to do Aurora, chasing me and hounding me to, come on, when are we doing a trip? When are we doing a trip? So yeah, I think eventually it's inevitable. They'll definitely hassle me until I do it. And of course, I got all new gear since I last went. So I would love to get involved.
When you were living in the Northern Hemisphere, when you were living in London, did you always have to go on these extreme adventures? What was the furthest and most difficult trip you did? Or like, were you able to, for example, just capture them from, the north of England or Scotland?
Never did Scotland. I really wanted to. It was on my list. But to reach Scotland has to be a certain amount of power. So I think like that level 5 or 6 will be very visible in Scotland. 4, you probably see it on the horizon. It's very similar to Tasmania. So your chances are less, but I always want to do it, never got around to it. I just always sort of go to Iceland, Sweden, Finland, or Norway. They're my absolute go-tos. Yeah, that's the furthest will probably be in the north of Norway, probably. But then there's the extremist, most extreme places I've been. Definitely Finland. One night got to -45, which was unbelievably cold, and to a point where my tripod shattered into pieces because it was carbon fiber and it can't withstand temperatures like that. So I had 2 legs break in one night. I was like, oh my God. Then I worked out what it was. It's like, it's so cold here. It's actually freezing up all my carbon fiber stuff. So I was back to the old heavy metal tripods after that. So yeah, that's the most extreme would be that one. And then I've done in Iceland, I did 8-hour drive one morning to the top of Iceland, got the Aurora, and then got back in the car and went down 8 hours down to the other side of the island just to get the next Aurora for the next night. Did this circuit, like just trying to avoid cloud cover. That's all it was doing. And that's one of the biggest tips I can give to any beginners is your biggest adversary is actually cloud cover. So what you want to do is position yourself the day before or the day of, position yourself where it's going to be clear skies. And then you'll be guaranteed to see some Aurora. Even at a low level, like level 1 or 2 in Iceland or Sweden or Norway, you'll actually be able to see it with clear skies.
And is there a particular time of year that it's more prevalent?
Well, definitely the darker months. So basically, the Aurora is always there. You just can't see it if it's daylight. So it can be huge bursts happening right in the middle of the day. And if the sun's up, you're not going to see anything. The rule of thumb I always do is if you can see stars, you'll be able to see the Aurora. So we had a few times where it was just sunset was just coming down and stars were just popping up. And there was literally already a humongous solar storm happening. And I was literally sitting in a hot tub in Iceland, not prepared in any way, because I was like, we'll go ahead now. Yeah, I'll have a quick hot tub. Suddenly, oh my God. So, racing around, slipping around, getting the camera. And of course, I got a great shot of friends in a hot tub with their feet up and the Aurora above them. So yeah, it catches you by surprise. But as soon as it gets dark, you'll be able to see it. And so during the winter months, of course, you get longer window of darkness, which means you're pretty much expanding the amount of time you can view the Aurora in one day. So within 24 hours, you'll get maybe 20 hours possibility to see it. Whereas during summer, well, midnight sun, you'll get 0 hours because it's the midnight sun. But if you got, a normal day of 7 hours, that's going to be, cut right into your time, that little window to see the Aurora.
It sounds like when you're up there, it is pretty reliable. So do you ever use any sort of apps or websites like Aurora Watch or anything like that?
Yeah. Aurora Watch and stuff, just to track it. And then also to be strategic with where I'm going to be. So if you got, an 8-hour drive to get to clear skies for a level 2 night, or do you rest up and drive the other way and get the following night with a level 4? So you sort of plan out and you got to get really strategic. So you got the cloud cover on one browser, you got the Aurora prediction on the other, and then you got the map of where you are. So you work out where you can be. And that's sort of the absolute sweet spot and absolute thing I'd recommend. The biggest mistake people make is they pre-book all their accommodation before they even get there. And so what I worked out to do, what I was doing is pretty much, because it's peak winter, it's off season in most of those Scandinavian countries. So there's plenty of hotels everywhere. So you've got no problem booking the morning of, or even an hour before. You can just turn up and go, do you have a room? And everyone's got rooms. So I was on literally that day, that morning, or that night, booking the hotel for the night I'm going to sleep there. And that means I was so mobile, I could get around anywhere in the country was my oyster. And that became the ultimate technique, where you could just be so mobile, you could get to clear skies, no problem at all, or plan out your day. Okay, if it's going to be a level 5 predicted in the 3 days, I need to get into the best possible position. Where is that going to be? Is it the top of Iceland or the bottom of Iceland or the west or the east? I'd work out where to be. And that is the absolute best tactic.
That is proper insider information. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
You sort of mentioned like kit and equipment already a wee bit, but I thought it'd be worth sort of like, as this podcast is about how to photograph the aurora, let's talk equipment. So presumably you're using a DSLR camera.
Yep, correct.
And what about sort of, you've mentioned like tripod, but presumably you need a tripod because you're capturing long exposures. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much all you really need is a DSLR and a tripod. That's your core stuff. On top of that, of course, gloves and things like that, and spare batteries, because the batteries won't last as long in the cold. And you don't want to have a dead battery when you've got this amazing aurora happening. So spare batteries, you want to go for a wide lens that has the largest possible aperture. So general rule of thumb, an awesome lens is like 16 mil with an aperture of f2.8. So that lets lots of light in. So nice and wide, so you get these beautiful landscapes. You don't want to zoom in too much on the aurora. Nice and wide, and then also lots of light to get in. Then you want to use your settings. ISO, I always start at 1,000, especially with cameras these days, they can totally handle 1,000 ISO, f2.8, and then you want to shoot off. If you're suspicious of a cloud that could be turning into the aurora, do like a 10-second exposure, 10 or 15 seconds, and then sort of go up from there with the seconds and keep my ISO at about 1,000. But in terms of other gear, also, I think the Canon require like a little remote that you can plug in and you hit with your hand, so you don't always bump the tripod when you hit the capture button. What else in terms of gear? I mean, that's pretty much the core bits. Apart from that, it's taking care of yourself. If you're too cold, you won't be able to last as long out chasing the aurora. And if you're not comfortable, you won't be able to stay as long. So get as comfortable as possible, which means hot chocolate in a thermo flask, good gloves, and then those little gloves underneath your gloves that you can take off the big ones and use your camera with little ones and then put the big ones back on. Of course, good shoes and boots, keep warm. That's about it in terms of gear.
What about for someone who doesn't have a DSLR camera, that sort of stuff? Can you capture much with a sort of a more basic digital camera or even a smartphone?
Yeah, I mean, digital cameras are so rare these days to see, but smartphones, of course, every single person in the world has one. I'm pretty sure most of the latest ones, the last couple of years, are really good with long exposure. And as long as you can do long exposure, you're fine. Even though the sensor is really small, they'll still be fantastic for any sort of social media or online stuff. The phones these days are just incredible, what they can do. They will always vary, but what you have to look for is the lens of the phone. So whether it's got a good aperture. So 2.8 is what you want to aim for, and a nice sort of wide lens. So a lot of the wider lenses tend to have an aperture that's not as good. If you notice on things like the iPhone 15, I've seen in video would look nice, but then as soon as you go wide lens, it actually looks darker all of a sudden, or grainier. It's because it's not letting as much light in, so it has to compensate. So what you want to do is let as much light as you can in and be nice and wide.
I suppose also the thing about smartphone cameras is maybe quite a lot of people who are using them might not realize that their smartphone camera has a mode where you can turn all the auto stuff off.
Yes.
Most of them you can go into some sort of mode where you can do everything manually. Is that something that you sort of recommend?
Yep, absolutely. Same with the SLR. You want to go manual mode. You want to turn off autofocus because your camera won't be able to focus on the stars in the darkness. Basically, what you want to do is find a star and focus on it. So manual exposure settings and then manual focus as well. Then adjust the focus to be, usually it has like a picture of a mountain, which means like landscape shot. The focus distance is miles away. So you want to do that, lock it as that and not change it. And then you want to have your manual settings of, about 15 seconds exposure and then ISO about 1,000. And then experiment with whichever phone you've got or whichever camera you got. You need to sort of find the sweet spot of where the exposures are looking. Best thing to do is to practice before you go. So in the night sky, challenge yourself to go and capture a star or a couple of stars or a little constellation. That's the best thing to do. And of course, everyone can operate a camera when it's perfect warm conditions, but try to do it when it's pitch black, freezing cold, your hands have gone numb, and you're excited because the aurora could be around. It's much harder. So definitely practice indoors. The amount of times I've had people try and put the camera on the tripod and not know how to do it or not have the right base plate. I'm like, oh, because I didn't practice beforehand. So you got to sort of definitely practice in warm conditions, comfortable conditions indoors before you go out.
It's just occurred to me actually when you say that, presumably a good investment if you're trying to capture it with a smartphone would be, you can get like gloves, can't you, that are smartphone?
Gloves, touch interface ones, yeah. So I still use them as well because there's good reason for it. I think some of the SLRs have got touchscreens on the back now. for focus and things like that and other little features. So it's just easier. And also to use your phone if you want to call a friend or something, because I kept on pulling off my glove to use my phone. And then as soon as you're touching your phone, your hands just ice up when it's, minus 30 or something. And so then you can't feel your hand, and then you're uncomfortable. Then you have to try and warm it up. And then, there comes another burden on what you're trying to do. So definitely have the right gear in terms of warm gear, functional gear.
Let's finish off by just sort of a little bit about you and your future. Have you got any good Aurora adventures planned over the next year or so?
I've been trying to get up there past couple of years. So definitely either this year or next year or both. As I said before, definitely was the solar maximum. So I still think it hasn't peaked yet. I keep on checking and it keeps on saying we think that there's more to come. In May, we had that extraordinary blast, which pretty much pushed the Aurora into places where it's never been before in the last 20 years, which is absolutely phenomenal. But I wouldn't think we'd have another one of them. As I say, it's one in every 20 years usually. But for the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to be really good conditions. So definitely I recommend to anyone to go up there. It doesn't mean you're not going to see it out of that season, but it means your frequency of the Aurora is so much higher. You're 3 times more likely to see it when you go up. So all you need then is clear skies. And usually the peak of winter, absolute peak of winter, like December, January, there's usually a lot of blizzards and crazy weather in the Scandinavian areas. So my sweet spot I found was actually October, November, which is sort of the end of autumn, beginning of winter, or the end of winter, the start of sort of spring. Those are the sweet spots where the weather actually chilled out a bit. It was slightly warmer. You got slightly less hours of the Aurora, but the conditions were clear skies, much clearer and a lot more enjoyable. And then you had a little bit of time during the day to do other things. Just in case you didn't get any Aurora that night, you go, okay, today we'll go and see this exhibition or something, or you have the better driving conditions to go further. So it was a bit of a playoff here and there. But I'm definitely absolutely frothing to get back up there. I nearly did it on the big blast was coming. It was just a little bit too late. I was about to go to Tasmania to try and get it because it's about a 4-hour flight from where I am. But by the time I realized it happened, it was already over. It's like, oh, I don't think it's going to do that for 2 nights in a row. But that only makes me more hungry to go up there in this year and just do a couple of weeks off and then come back at the year after and maybe do a month or so, just do a full tour of duty, all the odd places and nooks and crannies I used to find.
Amazing. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast, Jamen, and sharing. I mean, that's absolutely amazing insider advice there. And thanks again for coming on the podcast and good luck with your future Aurora endeavors. And hopefully speak to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian.
That concludes our special 4-part series all about the Aurora. If you want to keep up to date with all of the latest stargazing highlights, do subscribe to the Star Diary podcast and we will hopefully see you again soon. Thank you for listening and goodbye.